Bethesda's Starfield is still an enigma well over a year after it was officially revealed, and at least 4 years into full development. With hardly any commentary about the game provided by Bethesda at this year's E3, the wait is on for a full reveal of what the game will be. We are likely going to be forced to wait until next year's E3 before any substantive details about Starfield are released. The question, then, is when can we expect to have the game in our hands? So in this video, we are going to discuss the possibility of why, or why not, Starfield will be releasing next year. First, it is important to remember that Starfield has been in active development since the completion of Fallout 4. Fallout 4 released in the latter half of 2015, after which Todd Howard took a brief sabbatical and then, we assume, came back to get knee-deep in development on Starfield. The truth is that Starfield's pre-production goes all the way back to 2013, with a small team of people doing the legwork that allows Bethesda's much larger teams to jump into full development when the time is right. Now, we don't know how much of a delay the release and subsequent issues surrounding Fallout 76 have caused for Starfield. According to Todd Howard, Bethesda was aware that the game would require a lot of resources up front, but given the sheer amount of problems seen by the game at release, you have to wonder if his estimates were correct in this regard. Todd Howard even mentioned that in the final months leading up to Fallout 76's release, it was an all-hands-on-deck situation to get that game out the door. I have to imagine that following the release and backlash, that the all-hands-on-deck situation likely remained for at least another several months. Though Fallout 76 has largely turned into a much better game, it still routinely has issues, and it is clear that with the roadmap ahead, Bethesda is still pouring a lot of resources into it. This is not to automatically assume that the resources they are using for the game are to the detriment of Starfield, but it would be naive to assume that Starfield's development schedule may not have been negatively impacted by what many would call the Fallout 76 fiasco over the last 8 months or so. This is an important detail that we simply don't have much insight to, outside of Todd Howard's comments, of course. It still seems, to me at least, that Bethesda chose to salvage the reputation of the Fallout franchise in the short term while scaling back on what they were working on for Starfield. I think most developers would do the same, but then again you can see companies like Electronic Arts outright abandoning embarrassing failures like Mass Effect Andromeda, and more recently Anthem when they were pushed out the gate too early. So while it is admirable that Bethesda wants to continue to salvage Fallout 76, if it results in the delay of Starfield, my question to you is it worth it? Now, Fallout 76 aside, assuming a fall or holiday release of Starfield, that would be about 4.5 to 5 years of full development. I think that this is a realistic release timeline because Bethesda Game Studios will have gone about 5 years by that time without a single-player RPG release, or a major hit. We have no idea how profitable or not Fallout 76 has been, but it isn't crazy to say that Bethesda Softworks' releases over the last half-decade haven't quite set the world on fire when it comes to sales. Doom 2016 and the upcoming Doom Eternal notwithstanding, they haven't had a huge hit since Fallout 4 released. Supporting all of these different studios, not to mention Bethesda Game Studios itself, is expensive. I'm not advocating that Bethesda pushes Starfield out the door before it is ready, but I am just reminding people that there are financial considerations to take into account, and 5 years between releases for any developer is a pretty long time, even in today's development climate. If you look at the companies out there that take that amount of time between releases, they generally result in a genre-defining or at least incredibly successful game, or games that have been in development hell and you can really see it. Generally though, a long development cycle comes with incredible fan expectations. We have seen games like Zelda Breath of the Wild, The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077 push the boundaries of their respective genres. I think most of us expect the same for Starfield, and that's not because it is a new Bethesda RPG, but it is also due to the comments from Todd Howard himself, who proclaimed that they are building the penultimate space RPG. We expect that Bethesda hasn't had their head in the sand. We expect that they've seen technology and player expectations expanded by the works of other developers in the industry. They are certainly aware that the bugginess and issues seen in Fallout 76 are clearly no longer tolerated as they were in their earlier releases. In games like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, Bethesda was pushing the envelope of the genre, creating massive games with so much to see and do that it was easy to look past the rough edges. But games since then have become more ambitious, better looking, and more technically sound, so players have come to expect that. All of this is to say that Bethesda may simply have to devote a lot more time to quality assurance in Starfield than they have for any other game that they have ever made. And I would argue that that is a good thing. But lengthy QA is costly, and so it is a fine line to walk. We do know that pre-production for The Elder Scrolls 6 has been underway for at least a year and a half, if not longer. That leads me to believe that Starfield was in a pretty good place, development-wise, 2 years ago. You don't start pre-production 5 or 6 years out. Clearly there was light at the end of the tunnel for Starfield's development even back then. To me, this is evidence that we are more likely to see Starfield release in 2020. Further, if Starfield doesn't release next year and instead releases in 2021, we will have gone 10 years with only one major Bethesda single-player RPG being released, and that was Fallout 4 in 2015. That is an incredibly long time between releases, and the expectations of a game in development that long would be on another level. But there are reasons to push Starfield into 2021, and counterintuitively, they make financial sense. The assumption we are making here is that Starfield is releasing on next-generation consoles only. Perhaps what Bethesda is doing with the game won't be able to work on current-generation consoles. Todd Howard has hinted that Starfield would be on next-generation consoles, but that doesn't automatically mean that it would only be on those consoles, just to clarify. But say that it is. If so, it would be more financially beneficial for Bethesda to wait to release Starfield until the user base of the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox reach into the tens of millions. Now, there are two sides to this argument. Bethesda has released games with new consoles before, as they did with Oblivion on the Xbox 360. There is risk and reward there. If your game is one of only a very few quality releases at launch, you can almost rest assured that almost every new console owner is going to strongly consider purchasing your game. On the other hand, if that is only a few million people, you are potentially limiting sales rather substantially. Given the extremely lengthy development timeline for Starfield so far, only selling several million copies upon release could, objectively, be seen as a financial failure. On the other hand, if Bethesda wants to wait 6 to 9 months after the launch of the consoles and releases Starfield in the summer or fall of 2021, the user base could easily be in the tens of millions. The added development time could also be used for additional quality control or the addition of more game features. All that being said, there is also the possibility of Starfield being a cross-generation game, released on both sets of consoles. If possible, this is obviously the ideal scenario for Bethesda. Being able to release on PC and consoles with a combined user base of approximately 150 million systems, plus being out the door on a new generation of consoles, is the best of both worlds for Starfield. In the end, this is exactly what I expect to happen. Bethesda has spent considerable resources developing Starfield. It is a brand new intellectual property, and building a new IP from scratch takes even more time and effort than an established property. I am incredibly excited to play the game. Though Fallout 4 may not have been the genre-defining game some had hoped for, it was still an incredibly enjoyable experience, at least for me. Games like this only come around once every year or so it is quite an event when they release. Bethesda's single-player RPGs have a feel unique only to them, which makes a new release all the more noteworthy. So what do you guys think? Is 2020 the year we finally get to play Starfield? Let's discuss in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Maybe click that bell icon. And as always, thank you so much for watching.